have these events, free events, to open our building to be a space for this ongoing sharing of best practices and ideas. So it's my honor to be the speaker this time. To tell you a little bit about myself, well, I work here at Centro Cultural, and I've been here for about 11 years. Right now, I'm in charge of professional development and teacher training. So let's get started. I feel weird talking about myself. So let's get to the topic at hand. So let's see, here we are. The presentation today is entitled Soft Skills Are Hard Work, Incorporating Soft Skills Training in ELT Lesson Design. So the whole purpose is to talk about how we can incorporate training, how to train our students in these important skills as a regular part of our lesson design, and not deviate from our main focus of teaching our students English. We can still achieve that goal and at the same time address these very important skills. So before I tell you the agenda for today and the objectives for today and all that stuff, I want to start with a little warm-up. Okay, so we're kind of a full house. We don't have a lot of room to move around, but I want you just to talk to the person closest to you. I'm going to have you do a couple of very quick speaking tasks. If you don't have someone right next to you, you might have to move a little bit. Wow, that's cool, right? Psychedelic. Okay, can we get Betsy, can we get, there we go. Thank you. So I'm going to show you some images, some abstract images. And I want you to look at them in silence and choose one image in your mind that you think best represents your last academic year. Some of you are already back to work teaching. We're in February already. Some of you are about to get started teaching again. Think about your last academic year. And if you weren't teaching last year, maybe you were a student, think about that experience, right? And here's what you're going to do. Once you have that image in your mind, you're going to describe your academic year to the person next to you. And your partner is going to try to guess what image you were thinking of. So let me give an example. Here are these images in your mind. Think of the one that you feel best represents some aspect of your last academic year. Tell your partner, well, my year was like this, blah, blah, blah. And your partner's going to say, I think this was the image that you were thinking of. And if they're right, tell them they're right. If they're wrong, tell them what your true answer is. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for this, maximum, okay? Go for it. All right. I want to give you a next set of instructions. You're going to keep your conversation going, but let's do this. We'll figure this out here in a moment. So I want you to think of another image. You're going to see the same pictures, but think of another image, but one that represents your hopes or goals for this current year that you're teaching or this year that you're about to begin, okay? And this time, instead of describing what your year was like and your partner guessing the picture, you're going to tell your partner, this is the picture that represents my hopes and goals. And your partner is going to try to interpret what your hopes and goals are. And you listen to them and you say, well, yes, very accurate. Or you say, well, not really, okay? All right, so I'm going to give you 2 more minutes. Okay. Last one. All right, this time I'm going to give you 1 minute, not 2 minutes, okay? I want you to work with your partner to choose an image together, okay? So choose the image. It says images, but let's do singular. Choose the one image that you both think best represents your idea of the term soft skills, whatever that your interpretation is, okay? So, and then obviously say why, right? Go for it. Okay. I guess that's 1 minute, okay? Not sure. I'm curious just to know what images you thought of. We don't need to explain why, but maybe you could just shout them out. What's an image that you and your partner said, this is the one that best represents soft skills to us? Which one? The world with the magnifying glass, okay? Something? Same one. Family, okay. Something else? The forest. Lynn? Okay, excellent. Any other ones? No one chose this one? No, right? Okay, so let's do this. I want us to talk about our goals for this session. So after that warm up, sorry if I'm kind of turning my back to you, but let me get here so I can read. So the general objective for this session is to raise awareness, if it's not already raised in you already, about the importance of soft skills training in English language teaching for the development of your students' communicative competence and also for their employability, their ability to get a job now or in the future. So specifically, we're going to identify and classify some soft skills and some sub-skills according to some different domains. We're going to analyze some sample communicative tasks, typical language tasks that we use in our classrooms already, and suggest some relevant soft skills to focus on. And then we're going to define what's some language that we can use to help support our students' success in those tasks. We're going to hopefully have time to design a very brief outline of a communicative lesson focused on the development of soft skills, following a framework that I want to introduce you to called SOFT. And finally, at the end, have a chance to reflect on the content of the workshop and its potential application in your teaching context. So with that said, especially this last part, your teaching context, I know we're all coming from different places and our students are different, our realities are different. So I'm not trying to say that this is what you have to do, obviously. I just hope to, get a conversation started among us and inspire you to start thinking about how can I address these skills in my classroom. So I want you to start by discussing with a partner. I'm never going to give you too much time to just listen to me without saying something. So I want us to start by discussing a couple of questions here at the beginning of the session. Tell your partner, how would you define the term soft skills and what are a couple of examples? What connections do you see between soft skills and overall communicative ability? So how might soft skills and a student's ability to communicate well, how might those be connected? What strategies have you used to promote soft skills with your students, if at all? And what challenges are there for working in this area? So if I were to try to incorporate soft skills in my own teaching context, what would be some of the challenges that I would have to face? Okay? Take a few minutes to discuss that with your partner, but I'm definitely going to interrupt you, okay? Okay. Lots of talking. That was good. I'm not sure if you were just talking about the first question that you could remember. Well, that's okay. Well, at least the other ones, I want you to think about them as we go along, right? So your definition for soft skills and some examples, connections between the idea of soft skills and the communicative ability, overall communicative ability, what strategies you've used or that you could potentially use with your students, and then finally, big thing, challenges for working in this area. So let's start by defining our terms here. When we're talking about hard or soft, what's the difference? Well, when we're talking about something like pretzels, there's a big difference, right? You have these, they're okay, but you have these, nah, it's a different story. Big, soft pretzels are amazing, especially when they're hot, when you pour mustard on them, right? Okay, but I don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about soft skills versus hard skills. Where did that term even come from? So it has an origin in the United States military. Basically, starting in the 1950s, they were doing lots of research to find out, okay, how can we make our soldiers the best soldiers possible? How can we be as efficient as possible? Lots and lots of research into, how fast people could run, how, far they could shoot, and how accurately they could do all these different tasks that they could measure, right? And what they found was there was some other factor or factors that they could not easily observe and define that influenced the success or the efficiency of a group of soldiers, okay? So the kind of research that they were doing was much more qualitative, numbers, right? How fast, how far, how accurate, those kind of things. But they started to discover that there are a lot of other factors that are hard to identify and hard to measure that have a major impact on job performance. So putting two groups of soldiers that have similar training and, similar, on paper, they look identical, maybe have different performance in real life. And so they started to realize that there is a qualitative element as well to the leadership in those groups of soldiers. And they coined the term soft skills to refer to whatever these skills are. We're not sure what they are, but whatever these factors are that make a difference in performance, that are not easily measured and identified. So, we can think about hard and soft as something hard being like very strong and rigid. And maybe if we think from the military perspective, that kind of goes with them. And these soft kind of whatever skills. But I also like the word soft. Soft has a kind of connotation of almost fuzzy, fluffy, and hard, amorphous, hard to really kind of wrap your brain around. So something's fuzzy, like your TV. You're trying to adjust the focus on your TV because it's fuzzy. It's hard to see. It's obscure, right? And so I think a lot of these concepts of soft skills, we hear this term soft skills all the time. You need to improve soft skills in your students. It's very important. But the term itself is really fuzzy and kind of vague, even to us as educators. So sometimes, you can go to the internet or you can do some research to try to learn a little bit more, and that's not always even easy to do with this topic of soft skills. One of the dictionary definitions is soft skills means personal attributes that enable someone to interact effectively and harmoniously with other people. Cool. Still pretty vague, still pretty general, right? It's not very concrete and specific. Another English dictionary, desirable qualities for certain forms of employment that do not depend on acquired knowledge. They include common sense, the ability to deal with people, and a positive, flexible attitude. Again, cool. But what do we mean by common sense? What do we mean by deal with people and be flexible, right? These are still very fuzzy terms, right? And if you Google search, looking for very scholarly, reputable sources, it's hard to find. You can find all kinds of sources. In less than a second, you can find almost 300 million websites talking about soft skills, but a lot of I didn't find it very useful, at least the first pages that were coming up. What I was looking for, unsuccessfully, was some kind of systematic inventory of soft skills that I could just look at and say, here are all the soft skills and all the components that are involved. And maybe those studies have been done, but I couldn't find them, or at least not easily. They were not very accessible. So I started to think that it's really up to us to get that process started and make these fuzzy, soft concepts more concrete for ourselves and for our students. So that's what I intend to present to you today. We're going to look at a framework for conceptualizing different soft skills in order to make them more concrete, less fuzzy, and therefore easier to work with. When I can really define what something is in a concrete way, I can actually then apply it in my class. And then we'll also look at a sequence that you can use to plan lessons and activities with a focus on soft skills development. Again, just my ideas, and you'll see how they might be able to work in your context. So let's start with a little task. Before I do that, I want to pass out these papers here. I wonder if I can get a volunteer to help me with this. Okay. So, attention please. I committed the terrible teaching sin of giving the papers before the instructions, but I'm going to ask for your forgiveness, please. Okay, let's look at this. So let's try to think about soft skills on some different dimensions, okay? I think there's different ways that we can describe or classify soft skills. We might classify them as being more individual-based or more collective, okay? So that's the first kind of axis that I want you to think about. When I'm thinking about a particular skill, is it more individual, meaning performed alone or happening within the self? Or is it more collective, done to, for, with, between, or through other people? That's one dimension, okay? Is it more this or more that? The second dimension is it more involving thought and emotion? Let's say a heart and a head skill? Or on the other end, is it more involving communication and action? Let's say mouth and hands, okay? So let's think of that as a second dimension, okay? So individual versus collective, That same skill, is it more thinking and feeling, or more acting and communicating? Okay? Or is it impossible to separate? And you have to say, no, this skill is definitely both. Does that make sense? So you're not choosing this or this, you're choosing this or this and this or this. Okay? So you have a matrix on one side of your worksheet. Okay? And so on x-axis, I don't know, it's not a math class, right? Okay? Okay, so let's imagine this example. I show you a soft skill and you think, I think it's more individual. And then in the other dimension, I think it's more mouth and hands, meaning action and communication oriented. So where would I place that skill in this matrix? Right there, obviously, right? Or the other example, let's say you think for sure it's both individual and collective. I cannot separate them. And it's communication focused. I'm going to put it right here. Does that make sense? All right, so I'm going to give you a few minutes to analyze some different soft skills. And you're just going to discuss with your partner. Individual or collective, or both. Heart and head, or hands and mouth, or both. But don't do the easy thing and just put everything in both, okay? Really try to analyze it. All right, so let's start with a couple of examples here. You can get started with your partner.
I would be happy to help you.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you here, guys. So I threw a lot of soft skills at you, right? I'm curious, how was that process of trying to locate them somewhere on this matrix, on these two dimensions of thoughts and feeling versus communication and action? What was the other one? Individual and collective, right? Or both, yeah? Okay. Did you put everything in both? No. All right, good. Oof. Okay. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. It was kind of a trick, okay? I think all of them are, pretty much all of them are really, to some degree, kind of both, right? At least to some degree, okay? So it's kind of a trick. But this idea of thinking, what does this skill entail, is the first step of trying to make this concrete, this kind of cloudy idea of soft skill to something more concrete. I think there's more we can do to make it even more concrete. So here's what I want you to do. If you look on the other side of your paper, on the top, you have this chart here. Let's just focus on the left side, not the right side, just this left side. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to think of one of those skills that you saw really fast. So I was throwing them at you really fast. Choose one of those skills and write it there at the top. I'm going to give you my example. You can't copy my example. Yeah, you're like, oh, I wanted empathy. I want you to define it. Either use your own definition of what that skill means to you, or you can, it's not cheating, you can use a dictionary on your phone or whatever you want, and write a definition. It could be a combination of what I think, the dictionary definition, and I kind of create a mix there. So let's imagine my definition for empathy is this: the ability to understand and share another person's feelings or perspective, okay? And then what I want you to do is start thinking, okay, this is still a pretty big and general topic. How can I make this more concrete? What are some components of empathy? So if it's the ability to understand and share another person's feelings or perspective, being able to take another perspective is one aspect of that. Another one is being open enough to put your own perspective and feelings aside in order to explore other possibilities. Perhaps another component could be the ability to observe and listen actively to get clues about what the other person's perspective might be, right? And I could add more and more components. I just put 3 here for the sake of the exercise. And then I want you to think, what's some observable behavior, that I could see if someone is practicing this skill. So in the case of empathy, what might that look like? Perhaps it could be this idea of kind of mirroring or confirming what someone is saying. Mirror meaning kind of repeating back to them what they're saying to confirm that that is how they're feeling or what they think. Attentive listening, right? Asking questions, not to question like, why do you feel that way? But to get more detail to understand them in a better way, kind of judgment-free listening. If this particular skill that you're thinking of analyzing, it's kind of difficult to observe a behavior, maybe you can think, instead of about something I would see, think about a real life application of that skill. Where in real life would I use that particular skill? So in the case of empathy, well, in many cases, I hope throughout your daily life you're being empathic, right? But in customer service, you really need to be able to understand the customer's perspective in order to help them and provide them with a good experience. When you're advocating for other people, meaning standing up for others and defending others, you need to know how they feel in order to accurately represent their needs to someone else. If you're not into all this emotion and feeling and kind of stuff like us teachers, and you're an engineer, you still need to be able to understand the end user experience of a product that you're designing. How is the user going to interact with this? How are they going to feel, right? So, like I said, sometimes if it's hard to observe the behavior or think about what that would look like, think about a real life context in which that skill would be applied, and it might be easier for you to think of some of these components. So what I want you to do right now is to think of a skill, one of the ones that you wrote down on the other side of your page. You and your partner try to complete a very general definition, some subcomponents, and some observable behaviors or applications of the skill. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay, let me get your attention just to give you more instructions. Hold on. Okay, I know we're running here. We're going really fast. That's always the case. But I want to let you keep talking, but I want you to move now on to this side of the chart, okay? So we're language teachers after all, and we can think about these skills and these sub-skills, or let's say these behaviors or applications of the skill, and we could think of language, phrases, vocabulary that's related to situations in which this skill is applied. Yes, thank you. So this could be very helpful for our students in a very simple way to give them some simple phrases or question starters or sentence frames, whatever you want to call it. They can help them use their growing and developing language abilities in order to engage in some of these soft skills in English. So let's say if someone is applying empathy, they might use phrases such as, I understand how you feel, or I want to understand how you feel, tell me more about that. Or, so you're saying that you feel this way because of this, confirming, right? Yeah, that must be difficult, expressing some kind of degree of understanding. I'm sorry that you're going through that. Questioning, things like that. So again, don't think of a million things, but just a couple of kind of core or key phrases or question starters that you think might be involved in your particular skill. So I saw negotiation, for example. I can think of a lot of sentence starters that would be excellent, little useful interaction language that I could teach my students to be better negotiators, right? Or some of the other ones that you guys are thinking. So take a moment to write 3, 4 little useful phrases that your students might be able to use in an activity. Okay, I'm going to stop you here. So I think the key here when we're thinking about language is not giant paragraphs or lots and lots of very wordy sentences, but very simple phrases or beginnings of a sentence that can help students kind of get over that initial barrier and start trying to apply some of these things in a communicative situation. I think that we are, as teachers, are in a really kind of privileged position when it comes to teaching soft skills, because we have a better understanding of soft skills than most other professions. Right? The nature of our job, it means that we're constantly applying these soft skills to some degree or another. Like I was talking to someone back there, where he said, I do this all the time in my class, like mediation, for example. Well, yeah, we might want to teach mediation amongst our students, but we as teachers are mediators of all kinds of situations and things. It's going to be hard for you to see it down here at the bottom, but I want you to think. I'm going to show you a lot of soft skills, and I want you just to think in your mind, how many of these soft skills do we practice every day in the professional context in which you work? Okay? So you don't have to respond. I just want you to think with this brainstorm of ideas that's going to fall from the sky. Find yourself doing any of these in your daily life, in your working life. So I know this is a very kind of overwhelming visual, but I did that on purpose. Guys, active listening. Okay. Hold on. So these are all the same things from the previous lists, right? And there's more, there's tons of them out there, right? But I want you to think, okay, if I do this on a daily basis, or I would benefit, my teaching practice would benefit if I got better at some of these things, it puts you in a unique perspective because you're already more aware of these than many other people. So you can start thinking, how can I start actively trying to encourage these kind of skill development in my students? So I'm going to also kind of think, not only as a teacher are we skilled because of this, but as an English teacher, if that's what you are, then I think we are extra privileged and in a privileged position to be able to help our students develop. Why? Because many soft skills involve language use, right? I told you, I tricked you that many of them are not just thinking and feeling, but it also involves communication and action, right? So many, if not most, soft skills involve some degree of communication and language use, and that's our specialty. So we can definitely incorporate that into our classes. We can explore basically any subject in the classroom, since we're English teachers, as a vehicle for language practice and expression. It's not just math, social studies, whatever. Like we can bring anything into the classroom, any topic, as a way of studying and helping our students improve their language. So soft skills are not out of place there. That's a topic of our class. Communicative language teaching has a heavy focus on communicative tasks that involve real life language use. And that means that we could take advantage of those communicative tasks that are already a part of our class and add an element of soft skills focus in that task. And so that transforms our classrooms into a kind of laboratory for soft skills development in our students. So I think this is a natural point to take a very brief break. The caffeine and sugar and all that stuff is waiting for you over there. I'm going to ask for you to come back in 10 minutes maximum, and you can bring your snacks and coffee and everything and sit down, okay? But so let's get your snacks, say hello to someone you haven't talked to, and let's come back in just a few minutes. Okay, so we went to break, hopefully thinking about how we are all in a very privileged and unique position to be able to understand soft skills and then also be able to help other people with the development of their soft skills. So just to reiterate that point, again, from the English teacher perspective, we're already used to doing a lot more than just language teaching in our classes, right? We have to do a lot of things. Maybe depending on the school where you're working, the institution, they might require you to do lots of diagnostics of your students. And we want our students to work collaboratively and work on projects. Or we want to integrate technology in the classroom. Or we want our students to research. Or we want our students to do all these kind of things. So you're already used to being in situations in which the institution itself is requiring you to bring extra value to the classroom. But even the language teaching part itself is very complex. It's not just teaching grammar and vocabulary, right? This whole ability to be a good communicator, your communicative competence goes beyond just your grammar ability to areas of what's appropriate. Well, that's very soft skills related. Sociolinguistics. How do I interact with this person who is my boss is different than this person on the street that I don't know, with my best friend, right? This degrees of formality and appropriacy is a part of communicative competence, and it's totally related to the idea of soft skills development and other aspects as well. So I want us to do another analysis here. Let's look at these, I would say, pretty typical tasks that you might see in a communicative language classroom. So for example, a mock job interview where one student is pretending to be the boss and the other student is looking for a job, and they have a job interview, right? And they're practicing what? Present perfect and past simple and whatever vocabulary, right? Well, I'm sure that's an opportunity to also have your students address certain soft skills, right? What about the rest of these? Okay, talk with your partner and say, what could be some soft skills that are already a part of this interaction in real life that I could make an explicit focus on in my class? Okay, 2 minutes. Okay, so I hope that, you know, these don't seem like things that wouldn't work in a class of a certain, maybe a certain level of English, right? To be able to participate in some of these activities. But I hope you're able to see that it's very easy to look at a particular task that maybe you just thought of with a linguistic objective, right? Or communicative objective, that you could also add some extra elements there to explicitly focus on soft skill in practice or development. So I forgot about that, to think of your own most recent communicative tasks in your classroom and what soft skills you might add to them. But I'll let you just think about that. So I want to present you with a framework that you can think, okay, well, that's a skill that I could add. How could I integrate it in a natural way into a lesson cycle? Here's just one suggestion, my suggestion. Think about if it would work in your context as it is, if you could modify it, or if it wouldn't work at all, that's also fine. So I want to start with a quote. This is a famous quote. A rose is a rose is a rose. It's from a very weird poem. But the quote itself is interesting. Basically, it just means things are as they appear to be. Things are what they are, okay? Here's a more recent quote. A skill is a skill is a skill, okay? I think that we can look at soft skills training and soft skills development as we would look at any skill training in any skill development. We don't need to think about them as some kind of magical thing, right? So if, well, I'm just gonna read what I wrote. Soft skills, like any other skills, can be systematically developed over time with intention, right? If we intend to develop in this area, we're going to be more successful. If our students are aware that this is what they're working on, they can be more successful with intention, with obviously dedication and follow-up over time, with repetition. You don't learn how to ride a bike or swim or speak English with one exposure, right? Repetition of that practice, and application in a variety of contexts. So, and then to finish up my idea here, also what is very helpful for skill development is reflecting on your performance as a learner. And this kind of metacognitive analysis of what did I do well, what could I improve the next time, things like that. So as I said, it's not magic, it's skill development. So I want to show you one kind of lesson sequence that you might follow and you might find useful. So number one, select the particular skill that you want to work on with your students. So select the skill you want your students to focus on during that particular task, during that particular lesson sequence, during that particular unit, whatever it is, and inform them. Let them know, guys, today we're working on this particular thing, right? So that they're aware that this is what they're trying to implement. They will be more successful when they're aware that that's what's expected of them. Outline the steps. Analyze the skill with your students, okay? Explore its components, appropriate behavior related to that skill, strategies, support language, useful phrases that they can use to demonstrate that skill. Facilitate its application. This is the most obvious part. Have situations in class that allow students to put that into practice. So facilitate the application of the skills by having students participate in an authentic task. In our case, a communicative task that's also authentic in the sense that it mirrors real life communication and interaction in some way. And finally, have your students think and react on their performance, right? Have them think and react to the nature of the task, the skills involved, their own performance. What did they do well? What could they improve? Give them feedback. Have them give themselves feedback, give each other feedback, all that stuff. So just to kind of summarize here, all right? select the skill, outline the steps, facilitate its application, have them think and react. See what I did there? Okay, so I want you to now try this sequence. How might you design a sequence with soft skills in mind? So, well, the reflection part is essential. Here's a beautiful animation that I spent a long time working on. Oh, it's so beautiful. Okay. This idea of having students reflect on their performance is essential, on their linguistic performance, but also on their performance in the task, all right, and especially related to soft skills. So you have this other thing at the bottom of your handout, okay? It goes kind of in left to right. It's a little bit weird, okay? Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, all right? So this could be kind of, let's put all the pieces together and try to think of how might I integrate one particular skill in an organized way, in a sequence, in a lesson, right? So first start by selecting the skill. In my case, I was talking about empathy. Outline the steps. I already did that, okay? I defined it. I identified some components, some subcomponents, some behaviors or real life applications. And I also thought of some useful language that my students could use to demonstrate that, right? Now I need to facilitate the application. So I'm going to think of a communicative task that can be part of my lesson cycle that students can engage and use English and everything, but they could also put into practice empathy in this communicative task. And I also want to come up with some kind of activity or questions or something at the end of the whole thing to have students think and reflect and react to what they did in that task. Okay? So I'm almost done. I just got to think of my task, right? And what I'm going to do afterwards. You're almost done too, okay? You already have a skill that you started to outline, okay? And I want to give you about 5-ish minutes, maybe a little longer, to think of what could be an application of that in your class. What could be a communicative task that wouldn't seem very weird in my class, that would fit in my class, right? And what I'm trying to do with all the other objectives that I have in class, but that I could have students actively try to experiment with that skill, okay? And then what could they do as a follow-up? So I'll let you work on that for a few minutes. Okay. Here's the last thing I want you to do before we kind of start bringing this to a close. I want you to talk, but we're going to use our time management and I don't know what other skills here, but I want you to spatial awareness. I don't know if that's a soft skill. No, I want you to talk with the group behind you. And if you're the last group, obviously you're going to talk to the people in front of you. Okay, so let's do it like this. You guys are going to have to work with them. You're going to have to work with them. Something like that. Make it work so you can explain your lesson sequence. Even if you don't have it written down fully, what are the ideas that you're thinking about? Okay, very quickly, very briefly. Your skill, kind of the steps involved, the main task, and then how might you wrap it up, okay? I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to share your ideas with another group. So, again, we're teachers. We can talk and talk and talk and talk. But we have to cut it short. All right. So hopefully you at least had a chance to share some part of your ideas, but I know what happens in these group shares. One group is like really excited, sharing, and then the facilitator says, okay, that's enough time. And you're like, oh, I wanted to talk. You can have a moment to talk with your partners after the session, or we can keep the conversation going throughout the year. That's the idea. So I want to finish with some final tips and considerations. I think that it's really important to involve your students in every step of the framework that I was proposing to you. So for example, even from the beginning of selecting the skill, you might propose, hey guys, we're going to focus on some soft skills in this course or in this unit. Which one do you want to choose? Something like that, and have them choose the one that they want to practice. You started to see when you were looking at, for example, these communicative tasks, that there were so many different skills that could possibly be involved in them, right? So it's very easy to just, if it's something that they want to work on, you can think of ways that you can integrate that into your class, hopefully without having to make too many adjustments. So get their input about what they want to look at or focus on. When you're outlining the steps, that stage of defining the skill and its components, You can have your students do that themselves, especially if they're, well, I'm gonna say if they're adults for sure, but I would think even teenagers could at least start thinking about how they might, some of these aspects, right? With your help and guidance, of course, right? So let's think about this. What do you think are some strategies that you can use to practice this skill in real life? What would be involved in that? And you can kind of do it as a whole group activity, something like that. Or if you need to be a little bit more explicit with them, you could just provide it for them, but have them give their input whenever possible. When that facilitate application part, that communicative task part, obviously that's involving the students by nature, right? So by designing challenging, interactive, communicative tasks for your students that involve higher levels of thinking and processing and all that kind of stuff, it'll be very easy to integrate these skills there as well. And then finally, in the think and react part, you're having your students evaluate their own performance, identifying their strengths, their areas of improvement, how they felt with that skill, things like that. Questions that they have, doubts. So they should be involved in every step of this process. This huge, overwhelming list of things, this is just a few things. If you look online, you can find really long lists of skills. But I think one of the really interesting things about soft skills is that they're so interrelated. Sometimes hard to separate one from the other. So just to give you an example, right? Let's take time management, for example. Well, time management for